Hey, what's up guys? You might remember me as the guy who made the 75-minute Klee guide before, or maybe you know me from my long ass written Klee guide on the KQN website or the Klee Discord server. I've been making Klee guides since she basically released, so I guess it's maybe 5 years now. And today is the day we've all been waiting for, which if you click here in the menu is the day that Klee finally gets buffed. And in this video I'm going to show you just how much the buff boosted her power. There's optimization tips because there are significant changes with her playstyle that you do need to know. We've got some updated calculations and also my theories, because even though these buffs are incredible now, I think it's very likely we'll get a better artifact set and a better 5-star weapon in the future that will make her even stronger. So if you want to skip ahead, feel free to use the timestamps provided. So in a nutshell, what they have done for Klee permanently, no matter what team, is that they buffed her normal attack speed and her skill speed. I actually spent a while doing some frame counting and it's not all uniform increases. Her first normal gets a smaller increase than stuff like her second normal or her third normal, or even her skill, massive 50% increases. And do you remember Klee's explosive spark mechanic? This, before the patch, was not very nice. There was an ICD on this, meaning not every attack was actually 50% chance. You only really maybe got 2 sparks per damage window. Well, now what they've done is she can stack up to 3 sparks, and pretty much all her hits except her charge attack have a 50% chance of making sparks. So you're going to be fully stacking this a lot. And not only that, if we skip ahead to her C6, if you're lucky enough to have that, that will give a further chance of not even using sparks. These are what the sparks look like. They're the little flower things that are highlighted around Klee. So you're probably wondering, we've got so much sparks now, what do you do with all these extra ones? Well, now, as long as you're playing her with another Hexavide teammate, which we'll get into, each time she does her third normal attack, she creates another charge attack. And her combo doesn't reset anymore. The sequence doesn't reset, which means each time you're spamming this, you're just getting 3 charge attacks. And again, for those of you who do manage to get the C6, there's also an extra chance of her other normal attacks generating charge attacks. So things can get very crazy. Lastly, just to cap off all the charge attack stuff, there's another charge attack thing, which when you are doing all these different attacks, you are able to give her charge attacks, basically 1.5 times true multiplier. So that's a separate thing to her original 50% extra damage. This is damage bonus here. Klee has always had this. Now her charge attacks are doing an extra straight up 50% more damage. So anyway, what a lot of people may not know about Klee is that if they fix her sparks, then that itself changes so much. More explosive sparks are not just more damage. More sparks means more charge attack damage, more hyper armor, more iframes, more AoE, more team energy generation. You're not going to get that much more of all these things because of her normal attack spamming playstyle, but still I bet you didn't expect all those benefits. So you guys know how a lot of people complain about how Klee gets staggered a lot and she's hard to play? Well, this is a secret some of you may have known already. I've talked about it in previous videos. But when Klee does a charge attack with a spark, she has increased interrupt resistance. And what does that increased resistance mean? It means she cannot be interrupted. Did you see that? You'll still get staggered if you mistime a charge attack like I did there. Unfortunately, this won't apply to the charge attacks created by her N3, but this is still nice. Because of all this extra sparks and the extra stamina we have, it now gives you the opportunity to decide, oh, do you want to dash or do you want to try and brute force with a charge attack? Both options will give you extra survivability, but you can also dash more. Like for example, if I just attack this enemy here, because now I'm getting 3 charge attacks from normal attacking, that would mean I have more stamina to play around with. So you get the choice now, which is a nice flexibility. So before, like, you might have been running out on stamina on Klee. Even if you're playing well, you could have had stamina issues. But now, even if you just want to incorporate some dashing, so the quality of life is a lot better than it was before. You've got so much more stamina to work around with. You can easily just dash out of the way, or like I said, if you do want to figure out how to utilize charge attacks, you can do that. But regardless, more sparks, 3 charge attacks, Klee has way more survivability. Now there is another secret tech that I do want to mention, which is known as CDC. Honestly, now CDC is made famous with Moika's new combos, and I've taught you guys this in a previous video before. How it worked was you could start rotations and you can get 2 charge attacks for the price of 1 spark. So if you do a charge attack and you quickly dash and do another charge attack, it would basically only consume the stamina from 1. Now damage wise, only the first charge attack got the 50% damage bonus, but it was still 3 damage. So you're probably wondering, with the new buffs and spark stacking, is this still an important tech to add to your combos? And I did some testing, and unfortunately, as you can see, CDC consumes 2 sparks. So it seems, unfortunately, the spark buffs kind of nerf CDC. But then again, how important it was to know and execute, I don't think is that relevant now, even though it's a bit sad we lost the tech. Because the normal attacks are so good. Doing a combo where you get 2 charge attacks and you don't get any normals, I think even if it was in the game, it might not have been a big deal. So with that being said, from my testing, what is the most optimal playstyle? What is the most optimal combo? It's the combo that's going to give you the highest DPS with good survivability and extra stamina to dodge. Breaking news, guys, but it's just spamming normal attacks. So we did a ton of testing, and I talked to a lot of other Klee mains doing a lot of testing, and the general conclusion was we couldn't really find any combo that mixes in charge attacks to be better. There were theory crafting combos. As you can see, I did a lot of testing with 100% crit rate, testing every combo that someone came up with, and I did find some combos that got close. Like for example, you can mix in N2C with your normal attack spam. Adding an extra charge attack like that can give you more iframes, it can give you more AoE, slightly better energy generation, but it isn't going to be higher DPS.
Bombs, so heavy.
I even tried dash cancelling the normals, and as you can see, dashing is just slightly slower than just spamming left click. So the DPS won't be higher, but it's not that much slower, and it does improve your survivability. I'm pretty sure I was dash cancelling very fast there, but you can see, yeah, it's slightly slower. It is worth adding that into your repertoire, but DPS wise, if you don't need to dash, I don't think it's worth dashing. Just dash when you can see a big hit coming in. That's what I would say. So yeah, you might be disappointed that there isn't some crazy combo I figured out, but I think I'm just going to say the recommended combo, at least for now, is just normal attack spam, at least until someone figures out some crazy tech combo, but that won't be anytime soon. But I do want to say, even if charge attacking isn't really a DPS improvement, one thing where it is an improvement is energy generation, which is small, but it's still 2 energy to your team per charge attack. So for example, as I said, one of the better combos was N2C, and then you did your N3, and then doing another N2C. Something like that can give you 1 to 2 extra charge attacks, which can be 4 extra energy to your teammates. It won't be useful for a team like Durin, Chevreuse, Fischl, but if you're playing someone like Shilonen, maybe someone like Furina who value energy a lot, then that 4 extra energy is doing something. So do your Klee normal attack into the E cancel into the burst, then dump your skill, then N2C, finish this 3, and then another one, then N2C again, finish it, 3. In comparison, you'll get a bit less energy but more damage. Just do E cancel there, dump your skill, and then just keep spamming left click. There, and then set up for the rest of your team. Also, please remember, one massive tip is you need to be holding W or your forward key after using Klee's burst, or just during Klee's burst. Just keep that held forward, because what happens is if you don't hold that forward, you're going to experience like a second lockout where Klee is just standing there like this. Also remember, dashing good, jumping bad now. We've talked about this so many times before. As you know from my previous guides, doing jump cancels DPS wise was never better than either dashing or even just standing still. So standing still was very fast, just like dashing was very fast, but jumping after a charge attack was always slower than that. And now, because they fixed the spark mechanic, Klee doesn't really have stamina issues anymore. It means if you do want to reposition or if you do want to dodge, just dash. Just dash when you want to move around. It's going to be faster than jumping, and then you're going to be getting those iframes from dashing too. Honestly, numbers aside, the ability to just dash basically whenever you want now on Klee is one of the biggest quality of life updates you could have gotten. The one sort of tech I would say you really should learn is pretty much as soon as you switch to Klee, no matter what team you want to play, you want to do her normal attack into an E cancel. And what that means is you don't actually want the bombs to appear. You just want to press the E. You do the normal first because her normal comes out so fast. But then you do the E cancel. This is what it looks like. So he spins, but he didn't actually consume the skill. And what that does is that activates her talents that require you to be using skills. So you're going to be building stacks. You're going to be getting explosive sparks doing that. You're also going to be getting Klee C1 as well. So what that does is that ensures you're getting full damage on your skill when it matters. And it's very easy to learn. So I can show you that. Let me just consume all my sparks. So I've got no sparks now. And you're technically supposed to be using a skill or burst to get sparks, but I'm going to do it with just using my burst. So that, and there we have the sparks without actually using the skill. That's the only thing I really recommend you definitely to learn. Other than that, you can spam left click to your heart's content. You can do what you want. You can incorporate charge attacks if you want more energy or more AoE. But yeah, the E cancel, very important. You can see even before the skill is casted, I got that spark straight away. So if you cancel it with your burst and interrupt it, you still benefit from it. Another thing that you're probably wondering, which I used to talk about a lot in my other guides, was stun locking enemies. Can you still juggle and stun lock big enemies? There we go. You see that? Very nice. Now if you still want to juggle, you can still juggle with a charge attack if you want to do that manually. It's quite nice. You can just spam normal attacks. You can dodge when needed. Keep spamming normal attacks and enemies will eventually just unable to even hit you. Anyway, you probably want to know just how much was Klee buff. Well, it's hard to really compare teams, but if I do compare it with the old Furina, Kazuha, Klee, Bennett team, as you can see in my counts, Klee's personal damage is a staggering 60% stronger with both teams using Bennett. Now for sure, Klee wasn't necessarily a hyper carry team before. Klee wasn't getting vapes, she was just taking the buffs from these three characters. But then again, the new Overlord teams aren't full hyper carry teams either, since Fischl and even Durin are bringing a significant amount of team damage, and they're not giving insane buffs like Chevreuse or Bennett will. But even then, in a team like this with 3 damage dealers, you can see Klee's damage is still a massive improvement over before. And bear in mind, when I'm comparing the Klee Furina teams versus other Klee teams, that is with the handicap of having mixed artifact sets, because remember, in their normal teams, she doesn't really have a viable artifact set, whereas one of the big advantages for Furina teams is being able to use the MH set. On top of that damage increase, Klee is now easier to play. She has less team energy issues since a lot of Overload teammates aren't that reliant on their bursts, and honestly she has more competitive team options. It's not just Overload you can play, you can still play Furina teams, you can even play Klee in some Lunar Charge teams, Burning teams, double Geo teams with Albedo. Klee has such a wide variety of teams now that are not that much worse than the optimal teams, which will be very fun for you guys to play, which is going to be nice because not everyone has the same characters. It's also going to be nice to mix things up. It's just nice having so much options now. So let's talk about Klee's constellations. So there's 2 things first about constellations. First of all, I know there are a lot of you Klee mains like myself who already have her constellations, since she's an older character and she hasn't really had much other ways to invest into her over the years. But secondly, even if you're only at C0, I'm sure you guys know this event here, Temper Thyself, her C1 is kind of technically available for free now, which is very relevant, so let's talk about it. This C1 has a massive change. It's basically just this bottom part here. She gets this huge 60% attack buff once she activates her C1 extra hit here at least once. How big of a DPS increase is this attack buff? It could depend on the team you're playing. For example, in Bennett teams, you have more attack than in Durin teams. It's not the biggest difference, but it is useful to know as you keep investing in your Klee. But the overall gain is massive. 18% damage increase for Klee, especially because the C1 before was not very good at all. I think with how I calced it, just the C1 hits alone were only 3 or 4% damage. So the majority of that damage increase from the C1 is from the attack buff. Her C2 also got decently buffed. Not massive, but decently. It might look like a wording change, but it's actually a mechanical change. You needed the mines to hit the enemy. Now it's both the mines and the initial Jumpy Dumpty hit. So I can show the C2 difference. So before, you get the Death Shred now. Just then. But now, you get the Death Shred there just by getting that hit. So it's a decent amount faster. It's a bit more consistent. It's nice quality of life. But the C2 is just not her best Constellation anymore now, which is very nice because even before the patch, her C2 was one of the better old Constellations. And to be honest, this is basically the only Constellation buff that really improves her as a support, but it's still about the same how it was before. And yeah, funnily enough, people used to say Klee C2 was such a good C2, but actually the C1 is stronger now. Honestly, the C3 and C5 have actually kind of gotten nerfed with this new playstyle because of Klee's new damage distribution. She's doing a lot more damage in her normals and charge attacks now, whereas before it was a lot more evenly spread between each of the skills. That makes it so increasing your skill talent by 3 levels or your burst talent by 3 levels, especially that skill, is just not going to be impactful at all. Now the C4 and C6 I don't actually have, so I won't be able to show it, but we can explain what it does. C4 got a pretty decent buff. Instead of having to switch out of Klee to get this extra damage here, it will trigger even if you're still on field with Klee. So it's very nice to always get that damage. And on top of that, it gets 100% damage bonus. Now from the testing, I don't think this is double damage. It doesn't mean this is going to be a 1100% multiplier. It just means you're getting 100% damage bonus, meaning I'm only getting 8% buff. But I mean, that's still okay, because usually characters C3, C4, C5s are quite bad, because most people, they're either C0, C1, C2, or they just get C6 for most characters. But yeah, you might be seeing this C6 massive buff, the biggest buff in the kit. The top part is the same. It's still energy generation for the team. You'll get 9 energy total for your whole team. This actually isn't the most energy that you get from this Constellation, because our C6 gives you even more charge attacks. It's RNG, but you get a good chance, a 40% chance of getting extra charge attacks, and you get damage bonus. So how I calculated this C6 is it probably gives you 5 extra charge attacks overall, maybe 6. So a lot of extra charge attacks, damage bonus, and on top of that, a ton of energy to the team, which can't really be factored here. That is a massive C6. And I actually looked at I Win to Lose's Venti calculations. Venti with his C6 goes from 127k damage to 270 minus 1. So I Win to Lose is getting 113% damage from C0 to C6 Venti, which is a bit less, but kind of the same as what I got for Klee. So I think this is how they balanced their C6s. And that's very nice to see, because a lot of old Constellations just aren't very good at all. The main difference is Venti has a signature weapon and Klee doesn't, but maybe we'll get there in the future. So speaking of weapons, onto the weapon section. What is new with Klee's weapons? So I did want to simplify the weapon section and say, even with all the changes, the old weapons didn't really change that much compared to my old calculations. You'll see a lot of weapons are just around the same level as the Widsith, and there isn't too much changes. Just like all my old weapon calcs, all the old 5-star weapons are about as good as Widsith, a bit worse or a bit better depending on your build. What actually changes things is over the past year, of course, as Genshin gets older, we get more and more weapon power creep. New weapons just have more stats, and recently we've got Varessa's signature, and even more recently than that, we've got Nefer's signature, which are catalysts with just more raw stats than the old weapons. Varessa's weapon is a crit catalyst with 28% attack. Nefer's weapon is a crit damage catalyst with 8% crit rate. Now the sad thing is, Klee doesn't even utilize these passives like Varessa and Nefer do. All Klee really uses is this crit rate here. She doesn't really get to benefit from this EM or this crit damage, and they get 50% boosted. So I'm pretty sure if you add both those together, that is 12 substat rolls worth of damage that Nefer gets that Klee doesn't. But if you want a good example of the power creep, Wriothesley's weapon came out in Fontaine and is a 674 base attack weapon with crit, same as Varessa's weapon, 674 base attack with crit. But Wriothesley's weapon gives 16% attack unconditionally, whereas Varessa's weapon gives 28% attack unconditionally. Now, having said that, Wriothesley's weapon in Furina teams is now even better, and it did get a buff. It's arguably her best in slot now in Furina teams because you actually utilize the normal attack damage and attack speed now. Anyway, my calcs focused around these newer weapons. Vivid Notions does have higher base attack than Nefer's weapon, which means it does scale not as good in Bennett teams. But in Durin teams, you can see it's arguably even better than Nefer's weapon. Crit stats are just always good for Klee. It's consistently good. I do want to talk about Tele Tula, which is Wanderer's weapon though. And this weapon actually also got buffed. It's one of the only old weapons that did get buffed, because you do get normal attack speed and normal attack damage. Depending on how much normal attacks you get, you can even be slightly better than Varessa's weapon. It is a strong damage improvement and you will see better results with these, so I do recommend using them if you have one of them. However, last thing on weapons, as always, I like to talk about the Widsith. Widsith is the most famous catalyst because of how well it scales in shorter fights. And not even just shorter fights, but say for example, if you're doing 2 rotations, you would only get this once. If you're doing 3 rotations, you would get it twice. And if you're doing 4, you'd only get it twice. So even then, in longer fights, it does depend on exactly how long the fight is, because this 30 seconds is not going to be there every rotation. But it does mean Widsith can actually overperform depending on how much buffs you get. It's also worth mentioning refines. As you can see here, I've got 2 refines on my Lost Prayer, and I technically have 2 on Skyward Atlas. Now, Lost Prayer and Skyward Atlas aren't bad, but you'll see in most calcs, they aren't really going to be better than the Widsith. They're just there or thereabouts. However, if you are a player who's been playing for years, you may have several refines on them, in which case, getting a decent amount of refines, these can actually be comparable to the better limited 5 stars, which I talked about. So always keep that in mind, and Lost Prayer even has the movement speed here. Lastly, for Klee returnees who are very clueless, we've talked about this for years at this point, but don't use Dodoko Tails unless you want to use it for fashion. It just doesn't have enough stats, and the stats it does give are mostly attack, which is not the best stat. You're going to see it near the bottom in basically every Klee calc ever. But if you want to do fashion, and go for it, I guess. So this is an important section of the video. I do want to say this is something I've been personally theorizing ever since they announced the buffed characters. So if you look at all the new buffed characters, including Durin, only really a few of these characters have proper artifact sets. Sucrose with VV, Albedo with Golden Troop or Husk. Same thing with Fischl, she has Golden Troop. But a lot of the other characters, especially a lot of the other 5 stars like Klee, Durin, Venti, even Mona, even Razor, they all don't really have a good artifact set. And these are the characters that are front of stage right now. These are the characters that have got buffed. And also, importantly, plus, I don't think that they are overpowered currently. So how much stronger can they actually get with a new set? I actually made this Copium set on stream quite a while ago. I kind of modeled this set partially based on the Codex set, how they treat Night Soul characters, and also the Desert Pavilion set here, because I also noticed that a lot of the Hexarite DPSs spam normal attacks, so I thought a normal attack buff here could be juicy. Anyway, the exact specifics of this does not matter, but just the idea does matter. I gave them crit rate similar to Marechaussee Hunter, Codex, and the Nodcry set. I'm actually quite confident in that because Durin scales with crit damage ascension wise. Venti's new weapon, which I don't have, gives crit damage. So 2 new things give crit damage and not crit rate. And on top of that, Klee, as always, scales with crit rate because of her charge attack, but she doesn't actually have crit rate ascension. So that's why I've got some normal attack stuff and crit rate. But you might say Codex gives 40% crit rate. MH is 2 years old now and it gives 36. Why am I giving less crit rate here? Well, basically I designed this that it would be maybe an 8 to 12% damage increase for most of the new characters. New sets are usually upgrades, but they're not massive upgrades. But there's another thing. Let me explain to you just how strong Klee is. So I'm sure you've all probably seen all these different damage calculations floating around about Klee's buffs. But you probably also know that calcs that posted online use something called KQM standard. And KQM standard is generally considered a low investment level that most theory crafters use. And you've seen Klee looks powerful in those calculations, right? But Klee is actually nerfed by KQM standards. And that's because with these 20 rolls, there's actually only so much crit rate you can actually give her. And as I said before, Klee ascends with pyro damage bonus. She doesn't ascend with crit rate. She doesn't have a crit rate set. She may not have a crit rate weapon. The max I can actually give is 8 substats. And if you look at my build now, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. In 3 artifacts, I've actually got more than the KQM standard Klee is allowed. And in my calcs with the Widsith, look how much crit rate I have. So most Klee calcs use the Widsith or a similar 4-star weapon. I'm not even at 70 crit rate. Klee in calcs is starved for crit rate. And as you guys may know, crit rate is usually the best DPS artifact stat. That means your Klee is calculating very strong, but she's probably competing against other DPSs which maybe have even 100% crit rate. So anyway, enough yapping. What I want to show you is if I give Klee, I give her 1 more crit rate roll. It's gone up by 40k. 134 divided by 130 is 3%. So just from giving her 1 extra roll, I'm getting so much extra damage, and it's still even way more crit to get. Let me change the weapon to Nefer's weapon. If I give 1 more crit roll, 145 divided by 141, 2.8%. So if you guys are familiar with Akasha, you will know, if you scroll down to substat priority, increases like that for a substat are one of the higher increases you can get. So 2.8%, 20 crit rate is 6 crit rolls, so times that by 6. So now you see my problem. So just giving a bit of crit rate, just that crit rate by itself, Klee is basically getting a 17% DPS increase from a new set. So that's not even including the extra attack or attack speed, whatever. It's way too big of an increase. There's no way we're getting new sets with 30-40% crit rate, because it would just be broken on Klee. If the set is weaker just because of characters like Klee, then other characters will get punished, so we don't want that. But the damage potential increase, because Klee has never had a proper artifact set, and because she doesn't scale off of crit rate, which you can get in artifact sets, which means if we do get some sort of Hexeride artifact set, it would be a massive increase to Klee, and she might legitimately be in contention for one of the stronger DPS in the game. Not the strongest, but one of the stronger. And if she's not already, she would definitely be up there with a proper artifact set. And that's one of the reasons why Furina was so good with Klee. Klee getting 36% crit rate here from MH is a lot of damage. In fact, to the point where if you remove the MH set and you're still playing a Furina team, then their synergy and their teams aren't actually that good. This was the biggest synergy between Klee and Furina. But it's not just the artifact set. Klee also doesn't really have a 5-star weapon. Now the question is, why did Hoyo give Venti 2 signature 5-stars before Klee even got 1? So remember, in my weapon calcs, Nefer's weapon might actually be number 1. Funnily enough, if you guys remember my old Klee calcs back in the day, I used to make theory crafted weapons like a Jade Catalyst, Polar Star Catalyst, Aqua Catalyst, and the 8% of Nefer's kind of perfectly slots here with what an Aqua would have been. But if you look about why Nefer's weapon is so good for Klee, it's only good because it gives crit damage and crit rate. All the power budget here is basically completely wasted. Basically 12 extra substats worth of damage. But let's not get too greedy. We don't need 12 more substats of a signature. Now let's say my idea is Alice releases as a catalyst user, and she maybe has some sort of Hexeride condition in her signature, maybe gives some pyro damage. Something like that could be super realistic. If Nefer's weapon is 8% stronger with Widsith, maybe an Alice weapon with actual stuff here could be 20-25% stronger than the Widsith. Let's add in 15% for an artifact set, and let's not get greedy. Let's add in another 15% from our actual weapon. What do we end up with? Turn it into percentage. So not even getting that greedy, your Klee could be doing 20, 30, 40% more damage quite easily. That is a massive improvement and it's very achievable. And we're not even talking about future teammates, because with this whole Hexavite thing, they've already released Durin, but there is real estate for the witches to get added as teammates. Who knows what they can add. The point is, if you're happy with Klee's damage right now, there is a decent chance it gets a lot stronger than this. Anyway, here's the artifact set situation. For most teams, it's going to look like Overload. Mixed sets are basically the best you're going to get. Even something here like Lava Walker. Lava Walker's barely an upgrade, assuming 100% uptime, which is not even going to happen. But for Furina teams though, MH is a massive increase. Nothing has really changed from my previous guide. You're still looking at somewhere between 15 and 20% damage increase, so it's way worth it. And things should similarly apply if you are planning on playing a lot of the more niche teams like Unfinished Reverie and Burning teams, or even if you want to play Klee with Inefa and Lunar Charge teams. But for most players and most teams, I would say don't farm, just stay strong, diamond hands. So with Klee's new buffs, because a lot of that requires her to be played with another Hexavite teammate, from this point on, honestly, you should just always play her with another one, especially as there's strong options to choose from. Now that does mean old teams like this Furina team or Mono Pyro are basically dead, but it is what it is. Unfortunately, in particular, it does mean you aren't really likely to play Klee with Kazuha much anymore, which is unfortunate because, I mean, we've talked so much over the years about Kazuha's synergy with Klee, like this suction here and grouping the bombs. His damage buffs were also nice, and even his stamina reduction was also nice. But luckily, the damage buffs, there's other options now, and for the stamina, I mean, Klee doesn't really need that much stamina help anymore. But what are the Hexavite options you could pair her with? Durin, Albedo, Fischl, I would say these are three of the standouts. You can also pair with Venti, even though he's designed more as a DPS, the grouping could still be nice. Just like Sucrose, she's also a Hexavite character, so she could be nice. You could also play Mona as well for off-field hydro and buffs. But honestly, I would say these are the main standouts, and you only need to play one of them. So I would say Fischl allows Klee to work in Chevreuse overload teams, and that's her main strength. And a team like this with Bennett or with Durin are likely to be two of her more popular teams, I would guess. And Fischl being the Electro is very important for that. Overload teams, I would say, are the current meta way to play most Pyro and Electro DPSs. And with Klee's buffs, she's now way more viable in a more hypercarry role, so she works well in the modern teams, which is very nice. But in particular, Fischl has her own Hexavite buff. She is giving 22.5 times 2, so 45% attack to Klee after you trigger an overload reaction. She also gives it to herself as well. So 45% attack is no joke. Klee's damage is going up, Fischl's damage is going up, whereas someone like Albedo, he's Klee's big brother. That's probably why you want to play them. But his buffs are insanely good. You probably know already, his damage is basically doubled, and he now gives a team buff. So his damage has gone up, and he's giving buffs now. He's kind of Chiori and Shilonen put together now, at least in Hexavite teams, which is awesome. And not only that, but his geo damage constantly creating these crystallized shields. That's extra survivability. So Albedo has a lot going on for him. I would say some good synergies you could form is someone like Shilonen to give you geo res and more buffs. And then Furina, the cool thing is Albedo and Shilonen can also buff Furina. And you can get some nice buffs for the whole team here. An overload team like this, unfortunately, it is a big deal having Chevreuse's C6. This is 60% pyro and electro damage bonus. But if you don't have that, then there are many other options. You can simply just replace Chevreuse with someone like Bennett. Or if you don't have Chevreuse or Durin, you can easily just replace that slot there with Furina. And like all these teams, you're still getting the Hexavite bonus. You're still getting buffs to Klee. And there's a lot of flexibility here. This is what I was talking about. Klee has definitely unlocked a wide variety of teams that are still very strong. And yeah, this Furina team and the Albedo one, there are still Furina teams if you want to play those. Lastly, if you want a bit more variety, you can play a burning team with Emily. That allows your Klee to go from a random set like this to the Unfinished Reverie set, which is a massive damage increase over the mixed set. Attack and 50% damage bonus. But bear in mind, Emily doesn't really provide any buffs to the team, so Klee's damage will go down, but at least you can make that damage back up with the Reverie set. But something like this is a tech option, you know. There are bosses where you want a lot of pyro hits, either to break shields or their special mechanics, and a team like this could work well. But then again, an overload team like this also has a lot of pyro hits. So there's content coming in the future where you want a lot of pyro hits. There are many avenues for Klee, which is very nice. Now, having said all that, my personal recommendations amongst all those teams, if I had to pick two, I would place my bets in recommending either this overload team or that overload team. Not only do these teams pretty much have Klee doing the most damage she can, or at least up there with a ton of buffs no matter which one you pick, but I would say overload teams like this play into her strength. Especially with Durin, these teams will be super effective against any enemy with pyro weak shields. Also bosses like Lava Dragon due to the pyro hits. Even the Natlin hit counter enemies which want a lot of hits. And even teams like these, they don't have much energy issues, or at least relatively speaking, they don't have as much energy issues. Fischl doesn't need her burst, Chevreuse doesn't need her burst. There's a lot of pyro energy, meaning stuff like this will be very nice in the overworld and even setting up in Stygian onslaught fights. So a way to gear this team, very simple, just a normal Klee build with a random set, doesn't matter. Here are my stats if you're interested. I also have a Fischl, here are my Fischl stats. I've given her the stringless. It's a good generic weapon, or honestly you can even use sacrificial bow, or if you have 5 stars you can use aqua. Give her golden troop. These are what my Fischl's pieces look like. C6, very important for the damage boost here, but even if you don't have the C6, Fischl's still going to be a nice Hexaride teammate. These are my stats there. Chevreuse, the main thing you want to look out for is building 40,000 HP, as well as having a decent amount of ER and crit rate if you want to, because you want crit rate for Favonius Lance. This is what it looks like. Gives your team energy generation, and she doesn't need a HP polearm if she's already got 40k, and you get 40k by giving her HP artifacts. So fill up your Chevreuse with HP artifacts. I'm using Songs of the Days Past here, but you could easily use Noblesse on your Chevreuse. C6 very important, but in this team at the moment I'm using Noblesse on Durin just because I have nothing else, because he doesn't have a set. You can just give him any weapon that you have. Honestly, if you have something like Lion's Roar leveled, this would be very good. You get attack and his damage will go up no matter what the enemy has. Something like that is going to be very nice. And he doesn't, like I said, he doesn't really have a set. Just give him crit and some ER. Now the team with Bennett is slightly different, because Bennett, you basically always want him on Noblesse, which means Chevreuse, you want to use something else. So maybe then you kind of have to use something like Songs of the Days Past. I wish there was a way you can get scrolls on her, but that's not going to be very consistent. You can also use Tenacity if you really wanted to. Just like you can technically use Tenacity on Fischl in either team. But if you're playing Fischl without Bennett, so with Durin, you're going to be losing Bennett's attack buffs. So Tenacity will be very nice there. But other than that, this team is very similar. This is what the rotation might look like, something like this.
Justice will prevail. Go in. Jumpy, jumpy, go. That really flew.
Dodge when you need to. And I even one rotated that time.
Story has only just hands where I can see them. Boing, boing, boing.
Now if you want to play a Klee Arena team like this, these are some gear examples. If you're playing Klee with Furina, that's a perfect opportunity for you to switch to your MH set. Shilonen, a good candidate for your Favonius weapon in your team. A lot of teams, you generally want one Favonius weapon somewhere at least. And in a team like this, Furina's burst is essential and Klee is a solo pyro now. So energy is very nice. Scroll, basically the only set you would use on Shilonen here. Albedo's build, honestly, Cinnabar Spindle, you can't get this weapon anymore and it's not even that good. if you want to craft this weapon here, it's basically just as good, and it's free and it's craftable, and it also looks not that bad. So use one of those. The set, I would personally say don't stress too much. If you don't have a husk set, use golden troop. My golden troop is way better than my husk set. I've got pieces like this, but you want to cap out the defense for his buff. So what I do is I use defense sands with defense goblet and then crit. So that's very important because you want to try and get your defense as high as possible because of his new talent here, which will give the team buff based on his defense. So you want to try and get up to 3k defense for that. So other than that, nothing's really changed that much with Albedo. And the Furina, you want her to be dealing damage, so I guess you don't really want Fav Sword on her in a wet team like this. If you don't have Festin Desire, you could use the Pipe, I guess. And then Golden Troop, damaging set. The main issue is how do you balance her ER. I've personally gone with something like this. You don't want to get too low ER because, again, Furina is solo Hydro, Klee is solo Pyro. You don't want to be running out of energy. And then that's the rest of my build. Here's the rotation for this team. Albedo's burst actually does something here, the EM buff, and then you want to refresh Ilona's skill. Do a full Klee combo. And then you start again, and hopefully by the time you go back to Furina, her burst will be back. Another good team that I'll show if you don't have the perfect options. Team like this, if you don't have Durin, if you don't have Chevreuse, still pretty good. Furina's letting Klee get some vapes and buffing the team. Fischl's also giving her buffs. Bennett's also giving her buffs. Also, it's worth noting if you are playing Fischl with Pyro and Hydro, if you look at her talent here, she'll give you attack buffs and she'll also give you EM buffs at the same time. So it's not mutually exclusive. You can get both of these if you're playing an over vape style team. So the build's very similar, except I would say you either want even more ER or you want to give Furina Fav. That will impact her damage, but to be honest, you're not going to give Fischl your Fav weapon and you're not going to give Bennett your Fav weapon. So Furina might be the only option, but everything else pretty similar, nothing too different. Here's a rotation example for that team.
Time to shine. Everybody stand back. By royal decree. Blazing delay.
Dodge there. Oh, dodge there again. Time your dodges. Then switch out and start the rotation again. Dodge that. And there you go. So you're probably asking, in an overload team, should you play Bennett or Durin? Honestly, I think they both have their own pros and cons. So Durin brings more pyro application and pyro hits. I think that is very advantageous versus some boss mechanics, some shields. There's a lot of use for that just outside of damage. Bennett, on the other hand, at base cost, he does buff the team's personal damage much more. You can even see that here. Bennett does have bigger buffs than Durin. Durin counters those buffs by bringing his own personal damage. So the team's damage overall ends up about the same in a vacuum. They just counter each other. Bennett's buffing your Klee more. Durin buffs your Klee and Fischl less, but brings his own damage. But it's not just about damage, it's about quality of life. I would say Bennett brings significantly more healing. Chevreuse's healing is not bad, but it's not insane. 3k procs. You might find that your Klee is finding it hard to survive purely with Chevreuse. So that's another benefit that Bennett has. Bennett's burst more than double Chevreuse's. So you combine Bennett and your Chevreuse. Very nice. He'll also cleanse with the Pyro aura applying on Klee, so that will help you if you're fighting cryo enemies, for example the last Digian Onslaught. But again, relying on Bennett's circle, that circle impact, Durin doesn't have circle impact, so that's very nice quality of life for Durin. Although I should say Klee and Fischl can snapshot Bennett's buffs. Fischl will snapshot the buffs with everything, Klee will snapshot with her skill and her burst. But I would say overall it's very important to realize Durin can pull ahead further as you get more investment into him. And that's very relevant as he gives you another way to invest. Otherwise, it's very easy to finish investing on Klee. For example, if you're playing 4-star teammates like this, once you get their C6s, what else can you do? You can give Bennett a high base attack weapon. You probably already have that. Chevreuse, you can't really do that much. Maybe you can give her a Escoffier's weapon. Same thing with Fischl. Maybe you can give her a 5-star weapon. It's not that big. Klee, she doesn't really have a weapon. Maybe you've got her early cons, that's it. Playing with 4 stars, eventually you might be running out of investment. So having a 5-star, and not just a 5-star, but a modern 5-star, they're going to have very strong constellations. He's going to have a very strong signature weapon, and it gives you another avenue to invest. And my current investment priority order for Klee, based on both calcs and vibes, I would say you get Klee's early cons from the events, then you invest into Durin to replace your Bennett, then Durin C1, Durin C2, his weapon. It is worth knowing that his weapon is a bit more restricted than his constellations because this only buffs attack, and not just only buffs attack, but it gives extra boost for Hexaride teammates. So this is not going to be as universal, say if you're playing him with a HP scaling teammate or something. Then honestly, you can get Klee's C6, you can get Durin C6. I think Klee's C6 looks really fun and pretty strong as well, but you can prioritize Durin C6 if you want to have a more versatile account because he's an off-fielder, he's a support. Also, just putting these calculations here for people who don't know, but if you're wondering, is it worth level 100 in Klee? Generally, it's the same improvement for most characters. You're going to get about 4% damage per limit break. So level 100, 8%, it's similar to getting Nefer or Varessa's weapon. So it's not nothing, but it isn't that huge. And personally, I would categorize level 100ing and your 5-star weapon as if you have these available and you want to use them, then use them, get that damage increase. But these aren't going to be big enough to go out of your way for. I would just say just get this naturally, don't force it. Don't like force a standard 5-star just to get this, it's not worth it. Alright, so what is my honest thoughts on Klee's buffs? You know what, honestly, I couldn't have asked for these buffs to have gone much better at all. First of all, as a long-time Klee player, actually just a long-time player in general, at this point, I never even expected buffs for my old favorites. But about Klee in particular, over in the Klee community, for years now, we've been discussing copium buffs on the Discords, on the Reddits. I've made countless posts over the years. And there were some consistent feedback that people wanted to be addressed. First one, I would say, is fixing the Spark ICD. There was also faster attack animations. People obviously wanted damage increase. People wanted the skill cooldown to reduce, and people wanted signature weapons and a signature artifact set. And the majority of these got addressed. You know, they didn't technically fix the Spark ICD. Technically, it still does have an ICD, at least on her basic attacks. But you can get it from so much sources now, it's kind of fixed, which in turn fixes her damage issues. And I think there's a good chance we will get stronger artifacts and weapons in the future. The only major thing they didn't address was her skill cooldown. I think if you ask every Klee main, that would have been one of the biggest priorities. It should have been reduced from 20 seconds to 10 seconds, so you can reliably use 2 skills per damage window. So that's a shame, but maybe they were scared of Klee's power, perhaps. So with that being said, I'm very happy with these buffs. I've still got a lot to test. Hopefully you guys learned something from this video. Maybe this video even encourages you to save up for Klee, I don't know. Thanks for watching, guys. I'm going to be making much more Klee videos in the future. I'm also going to be making videos of the other buffed characters because I've really enjoyed learning about these buffs. So thanks for watching, guys. I'll see you next time.